The dinner had been my mother's idea. That should have told me everything. She'd called on a Wednesday and said, "Come Sunday. I'm making jollof." My mother only makes jollof rice from scratch when she wants something. Not for birthdays, not for regular weekends. Only when she needs the table to feel generous before the ask arrives. I know this the way I know the sound the radiator in my apartment makes at 3 a.m. The way you know things that have always been true and have simply stopped pretending aren't. I drove to her house in Silver Spring anyway. 40 minutes on the Beltway, the October sky the color of old pewter, leaves coming down on the 495-inch sheets. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself she just wanted to see me. I parked in her driveway at 1:08 p.m. and I could smell the jollof from outside, tomato and Scotch bonnet and bay leaf, that particular heat and sweetness that my body still responds to like a reflex, like being 9 years old and home from school. I walked inside and my sister Amara was already there. Amara, who lives 40 minutes in the opposite direction and never comes to Sunday dinners unless coordinated weeks in advance. Amara, who was wearing the engagement ring she'd gotten 3 months ago and had not stopped angling toward every light source since. Amara, whose fiancé Kofi had been, as of 2 weeks prior, living in a 2-bedroom in Rockville that he apparently planned to vacate at the end of his lease in December. I set my bag down by the door. I looked at my mother at the stove. I looked at Amara on the couch. I sat down. I waited. Before I tell you what my mother said when she finally sat down at that table, I want to ask you something. Has someone ever set a beautiful table for you and then handed you the bill at the end of the meal? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. My name is Zora. I'm 29 years old. I'm a licensed practical nurse at a long-term care facility in Tacoma Park, Maryland, earning $54,000 a year with shift differentials that push me closer to $61,000 in a good year. I am not flush. I watch my numbers. I drive a 2018 Hyundai Elantra with a dent on the rear bumper from a parking garage in 2021 that I keep meaning to fix and never do because there is always something more urgent. But I own one thing in this world that is entirely, unambiguously mine. A 1-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building in Hyattsville, Maryland, that I bought 22 months ago for $187,000. I put down $22,400, 4 years of saving, 2 tax refunds, and a $6,000 gift from my late grandmother that I kept in a separate account for 2 years before I knew what it was for. The mortgage is $1,140 a month. The HOA is $210. I make it work because I have made it work and because I decided at 25, sitting in a studio rental watching $1,050 leave my account every month for a ceiling that belonged to someone else, that this would not be my permanent condition. My sister Amara is 32. She is the older one, the prettier one, according to every family gathering I have attended since approximately age 7, though no one has ever said it directly. It lives instead in the longer hugs, the louder laughs, the way my mother's face opens differently when Amara walks into a room. Amara is getting married to Kofi Mensah in April. Kofi is an IT consultant. He is perfectly pleasant. He has a firm handshake and strong opinions about jollof versus fried rice that he shares without reading the room. His lease ends in December and, as I would learn over that Sunday dinner, he and Amara had been looking at apartments in the DMV area and finding that everything in their price range was either too small or too far from Amara's job in Bethesda. My apartment is 11 minutes from Amara's job in Bethesda. My mother served the jollof at 1:45 p.m. She served it the way she always does. Your portion determined by how much she loves you that week, ladled with a specific generosity or restraint that functions as its own communication. He gave me a full plate. I noticed. I ate. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing consequential. Kofi's job. A cousin's new baby. The price of plantains at the African grocery on University Boulevard. My mother asked about my unit at work and I said it was busy. It's always busy, and she nodded the way she nods when she's not listening. Then she set down her fork, folded her hands, and she said, "Zora, we want to talk to you about the apartment." I kept eating. Okay. Amara and Kofi need somewhere to live. They've been looking and everything is too expensive. You have a 1-bedroom and you're alone in it. I took another bite. I know how many bedrooms I have. We think it makes sense for you to let them take over your place. They'll pay your mortgage. You can move somewhere smaller. There are studios in Hyattsville for $1,300, $1,400. It would free up something manageable for you. The table was very quiet. Outside, a car went past on the street, bass from its stereo briefly audible and then gone. I looked at my mother. I looked at Amara, who was looking at her plate. I looked at Kofi, who was looking at my mother with an expression of careful neutrality that told me he had been briefed but wanted no part of the delivery. "That apartment is mine," I said. "I own it." "We understand that," my mother said. "We're not asking you to give it away. They'd pay the mortgage." "I have a mortgage because I bought a property. I'm not a landlord. I live there." "You're one person, Zora. Amara is starting a family. She's engaged. That's not the same thing." My mother's jaw shifted slightly. "This family takes care of each other. I've been taking care of myself since I was 23. Don't be dramatic." She picked up her fork again as though the matter was already resolving. "You have time to think about it. But Kofi's lease ends in December. That's 8 weeks. 8 weeks." She'd already calculated the timeline. I understood then that this conversation had not been organized in the last few days. This had been planned since before she called me on Wednesday. Maybe before that. The jollof. The coordinated arrival. The folded hands. This was a presentation, not a discussion. I didn't overturn the table. I didn't raise my voice. I looked at my plate for a moment, then at my mother, and I said, "I'll think about it." She smiled. Not warmly. Satisfied. I stayed for another 40 minutes. I helped clear the plates. I said goodbye to Amara and Kofi, and I hugged my mother at the door, her arms around me briefly, her perfume the same Chanel No. 5 she'd worn since I was a child and which I will always associate with the specific feeling of being simultaneously loved and managed. I drove home on the Beltway with the radio off. The hardware store on Ager Road in Hyattsville closes at 6 p.m. on Sundays. I got there at 4:52. The store smelled like machine oil and sawdust, the overhead fluorescents flickering slightly near the back. I found the lock aisle on my own. I'd been in this store twice before, once for shelf brackets and once for a shower curtain rod, and I stood in front of the deadbolt display for 4 minutes reading specifications I didn't fully understand before a man in an orange apron named Gerald appeared and asked what I was looking for. "A deadbolt," I said. "Keyed both sides. Good quality." "What's your door situation?" "Standard rental grade lock I want to replace. I own the unit." He nodded and pulled a Schlage B60N off the rack. "This is what I'd put in my own house," he said. "Grade 2 security, pick resistant, rekeyable down the road if you need it." "How much?" $58. I put it in my basket. I also bought a door chain, $12, and a new set of window latches for the sliding glass door on my small balcony because I had been meaning to replace them for 6 months, and standing in that hardware store at 4:52 p.m. on a Sunday with my mother's satisfied smile still sitting in the front of my mind, I felt a very specific need to make my home more mine, more locked, more finished and sealed and belonging to no one but me. I installed the deadbolt myself that evening, following a YouTube video on my phone propped against the bathroom doorframe. Gerald's recommendation confirmed by 4 5-star reviews. It took 47 minutes and one stripped screw I had to back out and reset. When the bolt finally seated cleanly and the key turned with a solid, definitive thunk, I stood in my own doorway and I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not triumph. Not anger. Just quiet. The specific quiet of a decision that has already been made, fully and without remainder. I put the old lock in a paper bag and set it by the recycling. Then I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and I drafted an email to my mother. I want to be honest about what those next 2 hours looked like. Because this is the part one don't see talked about enough. The part before the clean resolution, the part where you're sitting at your own kitchen table at 7 p.m. on a Sunday and you're scared. I was scared. Not of my mother exactly. Not of the consequences in any legal or practical sense. I was scared of the cost of this, the real cost, the one that doesn't show up in any document. I was scared of being the difficult one, the ungrateful one, the one who chose a building over her family. I was scared of my mother's voice going cold in the way it goes cold, that particular withdrawal of warmth that she has always deployed with precision, and I was scared of Amara's face at Christmas, and I was scared of the phone calls from aunts I love who would hear one version of this story and believe it without asking me. I was scared of becoming the cautionary tale at family dinners for years. Zora, who wouldn't help her sister, who made everything about property, who has no heart. I sat with that fear for a long time. I let it be present without pushing it away because I have learned, slowly at some cost, That the fears you push away don't leave, they just migrate. Then I thought about the $22,400. The 4 years. The 2 tax refunds. The $6,000 from my grandmother, Grandma Adwoa, who had pressed the envelope into my hand 3 weeks before she passed and said, "This is for something real, Zora. Something that stays." I thought about the morning I got the keys, a Tuesday in December, and I drove to the building alone and took the elevator to the 4th floor and unlocked the door to an empty apartment that smelled like fresh paint and winter air and was mine, completely mine, and I stood in the center of the living room and cried for about 3 minutes before I pulled myself together and started measuring for furniture. I thought about my grandmother's face. Something that stays. I closed the email draft without sending it. I picked up my phone and I called my coworker and closest friend, Patience Okonkwo, who has worked the same night shift unit as me for 3 years and who possesses the rare quality of telling you exactly what she thinks without making you feel bad for needing to hear it. She answered on the second ring. "What happened? How do you know something happened?" "Zora. It's Sunday evening and you're calling me. What happened?" I told her everything. The jollof. The folded hands. The 8 weeks. The hardware store. The deadbolt going in with a thunk. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her, and when I finished she said, "Did you change the locks?" "Yes." "Good." Pause. "Did you send anything in writing yet?" "I drafted something." "Didn't send." "Don't send anything tonight. Sleep on it. Call me tomorrow before your shift and we'll go through it together." Another pause. "You know this is the right call, yes?" "I know. Your grandmother left you that money for a reason." "I know, Patience." "Then you already know everything. You just needed to say it out loud." I hung up at 8:41 p.m. I made tea rooibos, the box Patience had brought me from her mother's visit last spring, the smell of it smoky and slightly sweet. I sat on my couch with the cup and I looked at my living room. My bookshelf. My grandmother's photograph on the wall, the one from her village in 1971, young and unsmiling the way people were in photographs then, serious, present. The throw blanket I'd bought at a market in Adams Morgan. The kitchen visible through the open doorway, small and clean and organized exactly the way I organize things. I went to bed at 10 p.m. and I slept better than I had in weeks. The texts from my mother started Monday morning at 7:14 a.m. "Have you thought about what we discussed?" I was 40 minutes into a 12-hour shift. A resident in room 114 had had a difficult night and I was monitoring her vitals and updating the chart and my phone buzzed in my pocket and I did not look at it until my break at 10:30. "Zora, Amara needs an answer this week. Kofi has to give his landlord notice." And then at 9:52, before I'd even seen the first message. "You know this is what's best for the family. Don't be selfish about this." I read all 3 standing in the break room with a paper cup of coffee going cold in my other hand. The word selfish. There it was. I had been waiting for it the way you wait for a familiar ache to arrive, knowing exactly where it's going to sit and still wincing when it does. I put my phone back in my pocket. I finished my shift. That evening I called my mother. I had written 3 sentences on a notepad during my lunch break and I read from them without performing. "Mom," I said. "I've thought about it. The answer is no. The apartment is mine and it's staying mine. I won't be discussing this again." A silence. Then, "Zora, I love you. I'm not changing my answer. Your sister is getting married. She needs." I know what she needs. The answer is no. You're being so selfish. Do you understand how this looks? What people will think? She is your blood. I know she's my blood. Then act like it. Her voice had gone to that place. Tight, controlled, precise. You have 1 bedroom. You're 1 person. You are choosing a mortgage over your family. I'm choosing my home, I said. That's all I'm doing. If you do this, she said slowly, don't expect things to be the same. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't remind her of the 4 years, the $22,400, the grandmother who said something real, something that stays. I said, I understand. And I hung up. The silence from my mother lasted 11 days. Amara texted once. A long message I read fully and did not respond to, not out of cruelty but because there was nothing in it that asked a question I could answer without reopening the negotiation. Kofi found a 2-bedroom apartment in Silver Spring, 2 miles from my mother's house, listed at $2,100 a month. I know this because Patience saw the listing. She lives in that neighborhood and recognized the building, and texted me a screenshot with a single word. Found. They signed the lease in November. I heard this from my aunt, my mother's younger sister Auntie Efua, who called me on a weeknight in a voice that held both warmth and carefully neutral information transfer. They found something, she said. I thought you should know. Thank you for telling me. Are you okay, Zora? I looked around my apartment. The deadbolt I'd installed myself. My grandmother's photograph. The rooibos tea on the counter. Yes, I said. I actually am. Auntie Efua exhaled. Good. Your grandmother would be proud of you. I held that for a long time after we hung up. My mother and I have spoken twice since November. Both conversations were short and surface level. Pleasantries, practical information, the emotional temperature of two people observing a careful distance. I don't know how long this lasts. I don't know if Sunday dinners come back, or what shape they take if they do. That grief is real. I'm not pretending it isn't. Losing the version of your family you needed them to be is its own particular bereavement, different from other losses but no less heavy. What I know is this. I sit at my kitchen table on Saturday mornings with coffee and the window open, the Hyattsville street noise drifting up 4 floors, car doors, someone's music, the tree outside dropping the last of its leaves onto the sidewalk, and I feel something I could not have named 2 years ago before I signed those 31 pages and drove home with a key on a plain steel ring. I feel like a person who stayed. 3 things I know now that I wish I'd known when I was sitting in that rental studio at 25. 1. A home is not a resource to be allocated by committee. It is not a family asset available for redistribution based on need. If your name is on the deed, you are the committee. Full stop. 2. The word selfish is not an argument, it's a pressure tactic. Anytime someone calls you selfish for keeping something that is legally and morally yours, they are not describing your character. They are describing their own disappointment that you are not doing what they want. These are different things. 3. What you build quietly is yours in a way that what you build for approval never is. I did not buy my apartment to impress anyone. I bought it because my grandmother gave me money and told me to get something real. The people who weren't watching when I built it have no claim on it now that they've noticed. Have you ever been asked to give up something you built yourself? A home, savings, a future you scraped together, because someone else in your family needed it more? Tell me in the comments. I'm Zora. I changed the locks. And every morning when that deadbolt turns, I remember exactly why.